The heat came up off the blacktop like something alive, bending the air above the parking lot of Trosclair's diner until the gas pumps across the road looked like they were underwater. Nadine Broussard wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and shifted the grocery bag on her hip, scanning the lot for her Civic. Her eyes caught instead on the row of motorcycles parked along the far end. 8 of them, chrome catching the late June sun, their riders gathered in the thin shade of a dying magnolia. She'd seen the iron levee patches before. Everybody in Terrebonne Parish had. They ran toy drives at Christmas and sandbagged during floods, and sometimes, when someone local died without insurance, they'd pass a helmet at their bar until it was heavy with cash. Her daddy had called them rough men doing soft work. She'd never spoken to one. Marcus was already in the car, waiting with the windows down because the AC had quit in April. 11 years old, small for his age, holding a composition notebook against his chest like a shield. She could see him watching the bikers too, his face carrying that mixture of fear and fascination boys get around dangerous-looking things. Nadine. She turned. Coach Hebert was walking toward her from the diner's entrance, toothpick working in the corner of his mouth, his Hebert's bait and tackle polo straining across his belly. His son Tyler trailed behind him, 14 and already thick through the shoulders, the kind of kid who'd peak at 17 and spend the rest of his life remembering it. Coach! She kept her voice neutral, pleasant, the voice she'd perfected for men who had some small power over her life. Missed Marcus at practice again Wednesday. He's not playing this summer. I told you. You told me he had conflicts. What conflicts does an 11-year-old have in June? Hebert's smile didn't reach his eyes. Boy needs to toughen up, Nadine. That's what football's for. Builds character. Behind him, Tyler was making a gesture with his hand near his mouth, a stutter, a mockery, grinning at someone in the diner window. Probably one of his friends, probably performing. He's got enough character. Nadine shifted the grocery bag again. Excuse me. She walked to her car with her spine straight and her jaw tight, the way she'd learned to walk away from her ex-husband, from bosses who let their hands wander, from every man who'd mistaken her quietness for permission. Marcus had the notebook open when she slid into the driver's seat. He was writing something, pencil moving fast. What's that, baby? He showed her. In his careful handwriting, Tyler said he'd drown me in the bayou if I came back. He said nobody would look for me because nobody cares about a R word. The word was written out in full. Marcus never softened things in his notebook. It was the one place he didn't have to fight his mouth to be heard. Nadine felt something hot and tight coil in her chest. When did he say this? Marcus held up 4 fingers. 4 days ago, the last time he'd gone to practice. Baby, why didn't you... She stopped. She knew why. Because every time she'd tried to address it, Hebert brushed her off. Because the one time she'd called the school, they'd said it was summer and outside their jurisdiction. Because she'd raised Marcus to solve his own problems, the way she solved hers, and somewhere along the line, that lesson had curdled into silence. I'm going to fix this, she said, and hated how thin it sounded. She turned the key. The engine clicked, 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 dead. No, 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 no. She tried again. Nothing. She'd been meaning to get the starter looked at for 2 months, but 2 months of crawfish plant wages didn't leave room for car repairs. 2 months of anything didn't leave room for anything. The heat was already building inside the car, pressing down on them. Marcus's pencil had stopped moving. He was watching her with those eyes that saw too much, that had watched his father pack a bag and never unpack it, that had learned early how thin the ice was beneath them. Stay here, baby. I'll figure it out. She got out and popped the hood, knowing she couldn't do anything with what she found, performing the ritual anyway. The engine block radiated heat. A wasp circled lazily near the battery. Starter? She startled. One of the bikers had crossed the lot without her hearing, a tall man with gray in his beard and a stillness about him that reminded her of the herons in the marsh. Patient, watchful. His patch read Iron Levee MC Founder. Below it, a name tag. Whisper. I don't know. She hated admitting it. It clicks but won't turn over. Sounds like the solenoid. He was already looking at the engine, not at her, giving her the space to decide what came next. I can check if you want. She should say no. She always said no. 2 years of saying no to everyone. Her mother's offer to move back to New Iberia. her coworker's husband who knew a guy, the church ladies with their casseroles and their pity, because every yes was an admission that she couldn't do this alone, and if she couldn't do this alone, what was the point of any of it? But Marcus was in that car, and the temperature was climbing past 95, and Tyler Hebbert's words were written in a notebook in her son's lap. Nobody would look for me because nobody cares. Okay, she said. Thank you. The man named Whisper worked quietly. He didn't fill the silence with chatter or ask questions she didn't want to answer. After a few minutes, another biker drifted over, younger, maybe 30, with a prospect patch and a toolbox. They spoke in low voices, words she couldn't catch. The younger one jogged back to the bikes and returned with a different tool. Marcus had gotten out of the car and was standing near the front bumper, watching. His notebook was closed now, pressed against his ribs. Whisper glanced at him once, nodded the way men nod at each other, and went back to work. You're Marcus's mom? The question came from the younger biker, friendly, not knowing what he was stepping in. I'm Nadine. She saw Marcus flinch at his own name, at the stutter the young man didn't know lived there. And yeah, I'm Peanut. Well, that's what they call me. On account of... He stopped, seeing something in Whisper's expression. I talk too much. Whisper tells me. He talks just fine, Marcus said. It came out rough, caught on the consonants, but it came out. Nadine felt her throat tighten. Marcus almost never spoke to strangers, not since second grade, when a substitute teacher had made him stand at the front of the room and just slow down and try again, honey, until he'd wet his pants from the shame of it. Whisper straightened up from the engine. Try it now. Nadine slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine caught, rough at first, then settling into its familiar rattle. Solenoids on its last legs, Whisper said, leaning into her window. I've got a buddy runs a shop in Montagut, owes me. I can have him fix it right, no charge, but it'll hold for a couple weeks if you drive careful. I can't. She stopped. I can't accept that. I can't owe you. I can't be another woman who needs saving. It's not charity. His voice was low, meant just for her. It's what we do. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the lines around his eyes, the stillness that wasn't peace but practice, the way his hand rested near his chest like he was checking something was still there. He wasn't pitying her. He was just a man who fixed things, standing next to a thing that was broken. There's something else, she heard herself say. Something I can't fix. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe the heat. Maybe the fact that he'd helped without asking for anything. Maybe because Marcus had spoken to a stranger for the first time in 4 years, and something in her understood that this moment, this man, was different. I'm listening, Whisper said. She glanced at Marcus, who had drifted back to the passenger side, but was watching through the windshield, his notebook open again, pencil ready. My son, she said, so quiet she wasn't sure he could hear. Please, I don't know what else to do. Please help my son. Whisper was silent for a long moment. The Wasp circled back toward the engine, then veered away. In the distance, the other bikers laughed at something, ice rattling in styrofoam cups, and the sound seemed to come from another world. Tell me, he said. She told him in pieces, the way you tell a story you've been carrying alone for too long. The stutter that started after Marcus's father left. The speech therapy she couldn't afford after the insurance ran out. The way other kids circled weakness like dogs circled blood. Tyler Hebbert and his friends. The mocking, the shoving. The promises of violence whispered in locker rooms and dugouts where no adults could hear. Whisper listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, watching Marcus through the windshield. That notebook, he said. He writes things down? Everything. It's the only way he can get the words out sometimes. Whisper nodded slowly. Smart kid. Smarter than people probably give him credit for. He is. Her voice caught. He's so smart and so good, and I can't... She stopped, pressed her palm against her mouth, forced herself steady. I've tried talking to Coach Hebert. I've tried the school. Nobody wants to deal with it. Hebert? Whisper said the name like he was tasting something sour. Bryce Hebert runs the bait shop? You know him? I know his type. He reached into his vest and pulled out a card, plain white, just a phone number and a small logo of a levee with a motorcycle silhouette. You have trouble. You call that number. Day or night. Someone will answer. She took the card. It felt heavier than paper should. Why? She asked. You don't know us. Whisper's hand moved to his chest again, that unconscious gesture she'd noticed before. I had a daughter once. She was about his age when... He stopped. The words seemed to cost him something. Nobody should have to be that scared and that alone, not if there's something I can do about it. He walked back to his crew before she could respond. She watched him go, watched the other bikers glance toward her car with expressions she couldn't read, watched them mount their bikes and pull out of the lot in a thunder of engines. Peanut, the young one, lifted a hand as he passed. Marcus, still in the passenger seat, lifted his in return. That night, after Marcus was asleep, Nadine sat at the kitchen table with the card in her hand and her father's faded LSU pennant on the wall behind her. The pennant had hung in his garage for 30 years before she'd taken it after the funeral. Sometimes she talked to it like she was talking to him. I don't know what to do, Daddy, she whispered. I don't know how to fix this one. The pennant didn't answer. It never did, but she kept the card. 3 days passed. Marcus stayed close to the house, reading, writing in his notebook, helping her hang laundry in the thick evening air. She caught him practicing words in the bathroom mirror once. Slow, deliberate, his face tight with concentration. He stopped when he saw her watching. On the 4th day, she came home from her shift to find him sitting on the porch steps with a split lip and dirt on his knees. What happened? She was on her knees in front of him before she knew she'd moved, hands cupping his face, searching for damage. He opened his notebook. Tyler and 2 others. Behind the gas station, they said they heard I'd been talking to bikers. They said bikers are criminals, and so am I. Who told them that? Coach Hebert. Tyler said his dad told him to teach me a lesson about the company I keep. Nadine's hands were shaking. She couldn't make them stop. Baby, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to... Marcus was writing. Again. Don't. You'll make it worse. You always make it worse. The words hit her like a slap. She sat back on her heels, the humid air pressing down, and saw for the first time how her son looked at her. Not with anger, with something worse. With the exhausted patience of a child who had stopped believing his mother could protect him. Marcus, he went inside. She heard his bedroom door close. She sat on the porch until the mosquitoes drove her in, and then she sat at the kitchen table until the sky started to lighten, and then she picked up the phone and called the number on the card. Whisper answered on the second ring. Talk to me. She told him about the split lip, about Coach Hebert, about the words in Marcus's notebook that she couldn't stop seeing. You always make it worse. Where does Hebert live? Whisper's voice hadn't changed, but something underneath it had. I'm not asking you to. I'm not going to hurt him. That's not what we do. But he needs to understand that this boy isn't alone anymore. Sometimes that's all it takes. She gave him the address. She wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. She wasn't sure of anything anymore except that her way wasn't working, and Marcus's lip was split, and somewhere in this parish there had to be someone who could make things stop. The next evening, 8 motorcycles rolled down Mason Street and parked in front of Hebert's Bait and Tackle. They didn't block the entrance. They didn't threaten anyone. They just sat there, engines off, drinking bottled water and talking among themselves like they had nowhere else to be. Whisper sat on his bike with a paperback book open in his hands, reading like he was waiting for a bus. Customers slowed as they approached, looked at the row of leather and chrome, and kept driving. After an hour, Bryce Hebert came out. His face was the color of raw shrimp. This is harassment, he said. This is intimidation. I'll call the sheriff. Public street. Whisper didn't look up from his book. We're not blocking anything, just enjoying the evening. I know what you're doing. Then you know why. Hebert's jaw worked. Behind him, through the shop window, Nadine could see Tyler watching. The boy's face was harder to read than his father's, something between fear and fascination, the same look Marcus had worn in the diner parking lot. My son didn't do anything wrong, Hebert said. Boys roughhouse, that's what boys do. Whisper closed his book. He stood, slow and deliberate, and walked to within arm's length of Hebert. He wasn't a physically imposing man, lean, average height, but something in the way he moved made Hebert step back. There's a boy in this town, Whisper said, who writes down every word because his mouth won't let him speak them. 3 days ago, Your son and his friends put hands on that boy, split his lip, told him he was worthless. He paused. I've read what's in that notebook, Hebert. Dates, times, names, every incident for the past 8 months. You want to call the sheriff? I'll give him a copy myself. Hebert's face shifted. For a moment, something flickered there. Doubt, maybe, or the first crack of recognition that he might not know the whole story. Then it was gone, replaced by the hard mask of a man who couldn't afford to be wrong. Get off my street, he said. Don't come back. He went inside. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. That night, 11 miles away, Bryce Hebert sat in his office above the shop with a bottle of wild turkey and a spreadsheet that showed 6 months of declining revenue. The big box store in Houma had killed him. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it. And he kept showing up every morning anyway, because what else was he supposed to do? He looked at the photo on his desk. Tyler, at 8 years old, holding a base he'd caught at Lake Verret, grinning like the world was a good place. When had that boy become the one Whisper described? When had teaching toughness turned into whatever this was? He poured another drink. He didn't have answers. He had a shop that was dying, and a son who was slipping away, and a wife who'd stopped looking at him the way she used to. He had a reputation to protect, because reputation was all that kept the creditors patient and the customers loyal. He couldn't afford to be the father of a bully. He couldn't afford to be wrong about his own son. He finished the bottle and fell asleep at his desk, and in the morning he filed a restraining order against the Iron Levy Motorcycle Club, citing organized intimidation and harassment of a local business owner. The news reached Whisper before noon. He was at the clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the edge of Montagut, when his phone buzzed with a text from a friend at the courthouse. He read it twice, then set the phone down and walked outside. Peanut followed him. What is it? Hebert filed an RO. If we go within 500 feet of his shop or his house, we're in violation. That's bull. We didn't do anything illegal. Doesn't matter. Judge granted it. We push back now. We're the bad guys. Whisper stared out at the bayou behind the clubhouse, at the water moving slow and dark. And there's more. He's threatening to call child services on Nadine. Says she's exposing her kid to known criminal elements. Can he do that? He can make the call, whether anything comes of it. Whisper shook his head. It doesn't matter if it sticks. It matters that she'll have to deal with it. Interviews, home visits, her job finding out. He turned back toward the clubhouse. We tried to help, and we made it worse. Inside, Peanut's cousin Bo was waiting. Bo was 34, compact and wiry, with a temper he kept on a short leash. He'd been quiet during the ride to Hebert's shop, quieter than usual, and now Whisper saw why. I need to tell you something, Bo said, about Hebert. I'm listening. He coached my kid brother 12 years ago, before I was patched in. Danny was small, like Marcus. Hebert rode him hard, called it building character. Danny quit football, quit school, started using. Bo's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. He OD'd 4 years ago. I always blame the drugs, but it started with that man breaking him down and calling it coaching. Whisper was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you say something before? Because I knew what I'd want to do, and I knew it wouldn't help. Bo met his eyes. But I'm telling you now because I need you to understand. I can't be anywhere near Hebert. Not with this restraining order giving him legal cover. I'll do something I can't take back. Then you stay here. You stay out of it. And what? Watch you handle it your way while I sit on my hands. My way hasn't worked yet. Whisper reached into his vest and pulled out a photograph, water-stained, edges soft with age. A girl of about 10, grinning at the camera, a fishing rod in her hands. My daughter, Celine. She drowned in Katrina because I wasn't there. My son blamed me. Still does. 20 years, and he won't take my calls. Bo looked at the photo, then at Whisper. I couldn't save her, Whisper said. And I've spent 2 decades trying to make up for it by saving everyone else's kids. But this time, I don't know how. Hebert's got legal cover. Nadine's about to lose everything because we tried to help. And that boy who writes everything down because the world won't let him speak, he's still not safe. He tucked the photo back into his vest. So I need you to stay out of it, he said, because I need time to think, and because I can't lose another person I care about to a fight that should have been handled different. Bo nodded slowly. He didn't look happy, but he looked like he understood. Whisper walked back outside and stood at the edge of the water. Somewhere out there, a gator slid off a log and disappeared beneath the surface. The bayou kept its secrets. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 19 years. It rang 4 times. Then, "Hello?" "Nathan," he said. "It's your father. Don't hang up." Silence. Then, a voice he barely recognized. "I'm listening." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a start. But it was something. "I need help," Whisper said, "and I think you might be the only one who can give it." Nathan Delahousse was 41 years old and hadn't spoken to his father since the 10-year anniversary of his sister's death. He'd driven to the cemetery in Thibodaux that morning, stood at her grave for an hour, and when his father pulled up in the parking lot, Nathan had gotten in his truck and driven away without a word. That was 9 years ago. 9 years of silence, of calls that went to voicemail, of birthday cards returned unopened. 9 years of building a life that didn't include the man who hadn't been home when the water came. Now, Nathan sat in his office at the Terrebonne Parish School District, where he'd worked as an administrator for the past 6 years, and listened to his father describe a boy who couldn't speak, and a mother who couldn't protect him, and a coach who'd turned cruelty into policy. "Bryce Hebert," Nathan said when Whisper finished. "I know that name." "He coached your kids?" "I don't have kids." The words came out harder than he intended, but I've seen complaints. 3 in the past 2 years, all from parents who pulled their sons from his program. Nothing actionable. The families always withdrew before we could investigate. Scared, probably, or bought off. This family won't withdraw. This mother, she's got nothing left to lose. Nathan was quiet. Through his office window, he could see the parking lot shimmering in the afternoon heat, the same heat that had baked the parish for weeks. Somewhere out there, a boy was writing down his pain in a notebook because the world wouldn't let him speak it. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I don't know yet. I just know I can't do this alone, and the club's hands are tied. Hebert's got a restraining order. If we push, we give him exactly what he wants. Proof that we're the threat, not him." "And you thought calling me after 19 years would help?" "I thought—" Whisper's voice caught. Nathan had never heard his father's voice catch before. "I thought maybe it was time to stop running from the things that hurt. Both of us." Nathan closed his eyes. He thought about the photograph he kept in his desk drawer, the one of Celine holding a fishing rod at Lake Verret. He thought about all the years he'd spent blaming his father for not being there, as if blame could bring her back, as if anger could fill the space she'd left. "There's a school board meeting Thursday night," he said. "Public comment period. If this mother— what's her name?" "Nadine Broussard. If Nadine has documentation, real documentation, she could present it. On the record. The board's been looking for grounds to review Hebert's volunteer status, but they need a complainant willing to go public." He paused. "It's a risk. Hebert has friends. She'd be putting a target on her back. She's already got a target on her back. He's threatening to call child services. Then she needs to get ahead of it. File her own complaint first. Document everything. Make it clear she's the one being harassed, not him." Nathan pulled a notepad toward him and started writing. "I can't be involved officially. Conflict of interest, since you're my father. But I can tell you who to talk to. There's a board member named Cécile Thibodaux. Her husband works at the crawfish plant." "Same plant as Nadine?" "I don't know. But Cécile's been pushing for stronger oversight of youth sports programs for 2 years. She'd want to hear this." Whisper was silent for a moment. "Why are you helping?" "Because a kid's getting hurt, and I can do something about it." Nathan set down his pen. "And because you asked. You've never asked me for anything. Not once in 19 years. I didn't think I had the right." "You didn't. But that's not the same as not needing to." Nathan looked at the photograph in his drawer, the one he hadn't been able to throw away no matter how angry he was. "I'll text you Cecile's number. The rest is up to you." He hung up before his father could respond. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door left open, and sometimes that was enough. That evening, Whisper rode to Nadine's house alone. She was sitting on the porch when he pulled up, still in her work clothes, smelling of crawfish and exhaustion. Marcus was visible through the window, hunched over his notebook at the kitchen table. "I heard about the restraining order," she said before he could speak, "and the child services threat. You shouldn't be here. His house and his shop, not yours." Whisper sat on the porch steps, keeping distance between them. "I came to tell you there might be another way. but it's not easy, and it's not safe. He told her about Nathan, about the school board meeting, about Cecile Thibodeau. He told her what it would mean to stand up in a public forum and accuse a respected coach of enabling his son's cruelty. He told her the truth, that it might work or it might make everything worse, and he couldn't promise which. Nadine listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Marcus has everything written down, she said finally. Every incident, dates, times, what was said, who was there, I didn't know until last week. He's been keeping records for 8 months. That's evidence, real evidence. It's a child's notebook. Hebert's lawyer will say he made it up. Did he? No. Her voice was fierce. My son doesn't lie. He can barely speak, but he doesn't lie. Whisper nodded. Then we make sure people hear him. Not his voice, his words. The board can read what he wrote. They can see the dates, the patterns. They can understand what he's been living with. And if it doesn't work, if Hebert's friends on the board protect him, then we figure out the next thing, but we don't stop. He looked at her. You asked me to help your son. This is me helping, but I can't do it for you. You have to be the one who stands up. You have to be the one who says enough. Nadine's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs, the way she did when she was trying to hold herself together. I've never been good at asking for help, she said. My daddy used to say I was stubborn as a cypress root. He meant it as a compliment, but I don't think it is anymore. I think it's just fear dressed up as strength. Fear of what? Of being seen as weak, of needing people and having them leave anyway. She looked toward the window, toward her son. Marcus's father left because he said I was too hard to love, too closed off, and maybe he was right. Maybe I built walls so high that nobody could get in, and now my son is paying for it. That's not weakness, Whisper said. That's survival. But survival isn't the same as living. She looked at him. This man she'd met 5 days ago in a parking lot, this stranger who'd fixed her car and answered her call and ridden through legal minefields to sit on her porch and tell her the truth. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Thursday night. You sure? No. She almost smiled. But I'm done being sure. Being sure hasn't kept my son safe. The next morning, Nadine called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. She sat at the kitchen table with Marcus and asked him to show her the notebook. He hesitated. This was his private space, the place where words came easy, where he didn't have to fight his tongue to be heard. Sharing it felt like sharing his diary, his prayers, the inside of his head. I need to understand, Nadine said. I need to see what you've been carrying. Marcus pushed the notebook across the table. She read for an hour. Incident after incident, documented in his careful handwriting. The first time Tyler called him a retard, the time they locked him in the equipment shed, the time they held his head underwater in the drinking fountain and told him to practice drowning. The date, 4 days ago, when Tyler split his lip and promised to drown him in the bayou. When she finished, her face was wet and her hands were steady. I'm so sorry, she said. I'm so sorry I didn't see. Marcus wrote something and pushed the notebook back. You see now. I do. She wiped her eyes. And I'm going to make them see too. But I need you to do something brave. I need you to let me show this to other people. Important people who can help. Can you do that? He thought for a long moment. Then he wrote, Will you be there? Every second. Then okay. She pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in months, he didn't stiffen against her. He held on. That afternoon, Nadine drove to the crawfish plant to find Lucille Moe, the co-worker whose husband sat on the school board. She found her in the break room, eating a sandwich and scrolling through her phone. Lucille, I need to talk to you about your husband's work. Lucille looked up, surprised. Nadine had worked beside her for 2 years and never asked for anything, never shared anything, never been more than polite. Everything okay? No, Nadine said, but I'm hoping it can be. She told her everything. When she finished, Lucille was already reaching for her phone. Cecile's been waiting for something like this, she said. Real documentation, a parent willing to go public. Hebert's had complaints before, but the family's always backed down. If you're serious, I'm serious. Then she'll want to meet you tonight. Her and my husband both. They'll want to see that notebook. Lucille paused. This won't be easy, honey. Hebert's got friends. He's been coaching in this parish for 15 years. Some people would rather protect a reputation than protect a child." "I know." Nadine thought of Marcus, holding on to her like he used to when he was small. "But my son's been silent long enough. It's time someone spoke for him until he's ready to speak for himself." Wednesday night, she met with Cécile Thibodeau and her husband Gerald in their living room in Chauvin. She brought the notebook. She brought the card Whisper had given her. She brought the faded LSU pennant from her father's garage, because she needed him there, even if only in memory. Cécile read the notebook with her reading glasses perched on her nose, turning pages slowly, her face growing graver with each entry. When she finished, she looked at Nadine. "This is systematic," she said. "This isn't boys being boys. This is targeted harassment that any reasonable adult should have stopped months ago." "Hébert knows," Nadine said. "His son is the ringleader, and he knows. We've suspected for years, but without a complainant on the record, our hands were tied." Cécile closed the notebook gently, like it was something sacred. "You're willing to testify at tomorrow's meeting, in public?" "Yes." "And Marcus, is he willing to have this read aloud?" "He said yes, as long as I'm there." Cécile and Gerald exchanged a look. Something passed between them, years of marriage compressed into a glance. "Then we have a chance," Cécile said. "A real chance." Thursday morning, Nadine woke before dawn. She couldn't sleep anyway. She made coffee, watched the sky lighten over the bayou, and listened to the silence of a house where her son still slept. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We can't be there in person, but we're with you. Ride safe." Below it, a photo. 8 motorcycles parked in a row, their headlights on, pointing east toward the rising sun. She smiled. It was small, and it was scared, but it was real. At 6:30, she heard Marcus's door open. He came into the kitchen in his pajamas, hair sticking up, notebook clutched against his chest. "You ready?" she asked. He wrote something and showed her, scared. "Me too, baby, me too." He wrote again, "But you're doing it anyway. That's what brave means, doing it scared." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke, out loud, the words coming slow but clear. "I want to say something at the meeting, not you, me." Nadine felt her breath catch. "You don't have to. I can read what you wrote." "I know." He swallowed hard. "But I want them to see me. Not just my words, me." She pulled him close. She didn't trust her voice to answer. But she held him, and he held her. And outside the window the sun climbed higher, and the day began. The Terrebonne Parish School Board met in a low brick building on Main Street in Houma, the kind of building that looked like it had been built in the 50s and renovated just enough to keep the air conditioning running. By 6:30, the parking lot was full. Word had spread, the way word always spreads in small towns, that something was happening tonight, something worth seeing. Nadine parked her Civic at the far end of the lot, next to a drainage ditch thick with cattails. Marcus sat beside her, his notebook in his lap, his lips moving silently as he practiced the words he'd written that morning. "We don't have to do this," she said. "I can still speak for you." He shook his head. His hands were trembling, but his jaw was set. "Okay." She reached over and squeezed his fingers. "I'm right here, the whole time." They walked in together. The meeting room was already crowded. Parents, teachers, a reporter from the Houma Courier with a notebook of her own. Cécile Thibodeau sat at the long table in front, flanked by 4 other board members. Her husband Gerald was in the audience, saving 2 seats near the front. Nadine spotted Bryce Hébert immediately. He was sitting 3 rows back, arms crossed, Tyler slouched beside him. When Hébert saw her, his expression flickered, surprise, then anger, then something she couldn't read. He leaned over and whispered something to Tyler, who straightened in his seat. The meeting opened with routine business, budget approvals, facility updates, a presentation about summer reading programs. Nadine barely heard any of it. Her pulse was loud in her ears, and Marcus's hand was cold in hers. At 7:15, Cécile announced the public comment period. "We have 1 speaker signed up tonight, Nadine Broussard, regarding concerns about the youth athletics program." Nadine stood. Her legs felt wooden, unfamiliar. She walked to the podium at the front of the room, and Marcus walked with her. "Good evening." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. My name is Nadine Broussard. This is my son, Marcus. He's 11 years old. For the past 8 months, he's been systematically bullied by players on Coach Hebert's youth football team, specifically by Coach Hebert's son, Tyler, and 2 other boys. The harassment has included verbal abuse, physical assault, and threats of serious violence. A murmur rippled through the room. Hebert's face had gone red. I have documentation, Nadine continued. My son has kept a written record of every incident, dates, times, locations, witnesses. I'm submitting copies to the board tonight. She held up the photocopies Cecile had helped her prepare. But Marcus has asked to speak for himself, to tell you, in his own words, what he's experienced. She stepped aside. Marcus moved to the podium. He was shaking visibly now, his notebook open in front of him, but he gripped the edges of the podium and looked out at the room. My name is M. Marcus. The words came slow, caught on the consonants, but they came. I have a seat stutter. It makes it hard to talk, so I write things down instead. The room was silent. Even the reporter had stopped writing. Tyler Hebert calls me R. retard. He says I'm stupid. He held my head under the water fountain and told me to practice drowning. Marcus's voice broke, but he kept going. 4 days ago, he split my lip. He said he'd drown me in the bayou. He said nobody would look for me because nobody cares. Nadine saw Bryce Hebert's face change. The anger drained out of it, replaced by something else. Confusion, maybe, or the first terrible dawn of recognition. He turned to look at Tyler, and Tyler wouldn't meet his eyes. I told my mom, Marcus said. She tried to help, but Coach Hebert didn't listen. He said boys are roughhouse. He said I needed to toughen up. He paused, steadied himself. I'm not tough, I know that, but I'm not a liar either. Everything in this notebook is true, and I just want it to stop. He closed the notebook and stepped back. Nadine put her arm around him, and he leaned into her, exhausted, emptied out. The room erupted, parents talking over each other, the reporter scribbling furiously, board members conferring in low voices. Cecile gavelled for order. Mr. Hebert, her voice cut through the noise. You're welcome to respond. Bryce Hebert stood slowly. He looked like a man who'd been punched in the stomach and was still trying to figure out how to breathe. He stopped. Started again. I didn't know. About the water fountain, about the threats. Tyler told me it was just roughhousing. Competition. I believed him. Did you investigate? Cecile asked. When Mrs. Broussard came to you with concerns, did you speak to your son? To the other boys involved? I spoke to Tyler. He said Marcus was exaggerating, that he couldn't take a joke. Hebert's voice was hoarse. I wanted to believe him. He's my son. And so you dismissed a mother's concerns. You dismissed a child's documented account of abuse. You filed a restraining order against community members who were trying to protect that child. Cecile's voice was even, but her eyes were hard. Is that accurate? Hebert didn't answer. He was looking at Tyler now, and Tyler was staring at his shoes, and something was passing between them that the rest of the room couldn't see. Tyler? Hebert's voice cracked. Is it true? What he said? Is it true? Tyler didn't look up. His shoulders were hunched, his hands balled into fists. Answer me! You wanted me to be tough. Tyler's voice was barely audible. You said Heberts don't back down. You said that kid needed to learn how things work. I didn't mean... Hebert stopped. His face contorted, and for a moment Nadine thought he might cry. I didn't mean this. The room was silent. This was the moment, Nadine realized. The moment where Bryce Hebert chose who he was going to be. He turned to face the board. When he spoke, his voice was rough but clear. I withdraw the restraining order, tonight. I'll sign whatever paperwork you need. He looked at Nadine, then at Marcus. And I owe you an apology, both of you. What my son did was wrong. What I did, dismissing you, protecting him, that was worse. I should have listened. I should have looked harder at what was happening right in front of me. He turned to Tyler. We're going home. And tomorrow, you're going to apologize to Marcus yourself, face to face. And then you're going to spend the rest of this summer making it right. I don't care how. Tyler's head snapped up. Dad, this isn't a discussion. Hebert's voice was heavy with something that sounded like grief. I taught you to be tough, and somewhere along the way, you learned to be cruel. That's on me, but it ends tonight. He walked out of the room with Tyler trailing behind him. The door swung shut, and the silence held for a long moment before Cecile spoke. The board will convene an emergency session tomorrow to review Coach Heber's volunteer status and implement new oversight protocols for youth athletics. She looked at Nadine. Mrs. Broussard, thank you for your courage tonight. And Marcus, she paused and her voice softened. You're braver than most adults I know. Marcus didn't say anything, but he stood a little straighter. Outside, the parking lot was dark except for the yellow glow of the streetlights. Nadine walked Marcus to the car, her hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension slowly draining out of both of them. A figure stepped out of the shadows near the drainage ditch. Whisper. He was alone, no bike in sight. He must have walked from somewhere beyond the 500-foot boundary of the restraining order that no longer existed. I heard, he said. Gerald texted me. He looked at Marcus. You did good in there, real good. Marcus fumbled with his notebook, wrote something, held it up. I talked. You did more than talk. You stood up. That's harder. Whisper reached into his vest and pulled out the water-stained photograph, the girl with the fishing rod, grinning at the camera. My daughter, Celine, she couldn't stand up for herself when it mattered. The water came too fast. But I think she would have been proud to know you. He handed the photograph to Marcus. Marcus looked at it for a long moment, then handed it back. You should keep it, he said. She's yours. Whisper's hand trembled as he took it. He tucked it back into his vest, over his heart. My son called me today, he said to Nadine. Nathan, he's the one who told me about Cecile, about the school board. First real conversation we've had in almost 20 years. I'm glad. He said, Whisper stopped, cleared his throat. He said maybe it was time to stop running, both of us. I think he might be right. A car pulled into the lot. A pickup truck, old but well-maintained. Nathan Delahousse stepped out. He was tall like his father, with the same watchful stillness, but his eyes were softer, less guarded. I saw the vote, he said. Board's recommending Hibbert's removal, unanimously. That was fast. Cecile doesn't waste time. Nathan looked at Marcus, then at Nadine. You must be the ones my father called me about. He called you for us? First time he's asked me for anything in 19 years. Nathan's voice was careful, measured. Couldn't exactly say no. Whisper and Nathan stood there, 3 feet apart, not touching, not quite looking at each other. The distance between them was more than physical. It was years of silence, years of blame, years of grief that had calcified into something that felt permanent, but they were here. Both of them. In the same parking lot, on the same night, because a boy with a notebook had reminded them that silence wasn't the same as safety. I should go, Nathan said. Early meeting tomorrow. He hesitated. But maybe Sunday, if you're not busy, Mom's grave could use some flowers. Whisper nodded slowly. Sunday. Nathan got back in his truck and drove away. Whisper watched him go, his hand resting over the photograph in his vest. Thank you, Nadine said, for everything. You did the hard part. I just made some calls. That's not nothing. Whisper looked at Marcus. You take care of your mama, you hear? She's tougher than she thinks. Marcus wrote in his notebook and held it up. I know. Whisper walked off into the darkness, toward wherever he'd parked beyond the legal boundaries that had hemmed him in. Nadine watched him go, then turned to her son. Ready to go home? He nodded, but before he got in the car, he wrote one more thing and showed her. Can we get ice cream? She laughed. It came out watery, half a sob, but it was real. Yeah, baby, we can get ice cream. 3 weeks later, the heat finally broke. It came with a thunderstorm that rolled in from the Gulf on a Sunday afternoon, dropping the temperature 20 degrees in an hour and leaving the parish smelling of wet earth and relief. Nadine stood on her porch and watched the rain come down, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands, and thought about how different everything looked when you weren't carrying it alone. The school board had voted unanimously to revoke Bryce Hebert's volunteer coaching privileges. There would be no criminal charges. Marcus's injuries hadn't been severe enough, and the Broussards hadn't pushed for them, but the parish knew now. The story had run in the Houma Courier, and then been picked up by a Baton Rouge station, and for a few days Nadine's phone had rung, with calls from reporters and well-wishers, and people she hadn't spoken to in years. She'd let most of them go to voicemail. Some things didn't need to be performed for an audience. Marcus was in the kitchen, working on a new notebook. The old one, the one filled with 8 months of pain, was in a box in Nadine's closet now, evidence preserved but no longer needed. This notebook was different. He was writing a story, he'd told her, about a boy who couldn't talk and the people who listened anyway. His stutter was still there. It would probably always be there, the speech therapist had said, the one Whisper had connected them with, a woman in Thibodaux who worked on a sliding scale and didn't believe in shame. But Marcus was talking more now, to Nadine, to the therapist, to Peanut, who'd taken to stopping by on Saturday mornings with beignets from the gas station and stories about the places he'd ridden. The car was fixed. Whisper's friend in Montagut had replaced the solenoid and refused payment, said it was already covered. Nadine had tried to argue, but the mechanic had just shrugged and said, "Take it up with Whisper." She hadn't. Some debts weren't meant to be paid back. They were meant to be passed on. She'd started saying yes to things. Small things at first. A casserole from a church lady, a ride to work when her car was in the shop, an invitation to coffee from Lucille. Each yes felt like a door opening, a wall coming down. It was terrifying. It was also, she was learning, what it meant to let people in. Her father's LSU pennant still hung on the kitchen wall. She talked to it less now, not because she missed him less, but because she'd started talking to living people instead. On the other side of the parish, Bryce Hebert was learning what it meant to rebuild from rubble. The bait shop had closed, not because of the scandal, though that hadn't helped, but because the numbers had never worked, and he'd finally stopped pretending they would. He'd taken a job at the marina in Cocodrie, fixing boat engines, working with his hands the way he had before he'd convinced himself that owning something made him somebody. Tyler was in counseling, court-ordered after Hebert had pushed for it himself. The therapist said there was a lot of anger in the boy, a lot of fear, a lot of pressure that had curdled into cruelty. It would take time, maybe years, but Tyler had written Marcus a letter, 3 pages, handwritten, full of misspellings and awkward sentences, and something that might, with enough time, become genuine remorse. Marcus hadn't written back yet. Nadine didn't push him. Some forgiveness couldn't be rushed. Whisper and Nathan had visited Celine's grave that Sunday, as promised. Nadine didn't know what they'd said to each other, standing in front of that small headstone in the Thibodaux cemetery. But she knew that Nathan had come to the clubhouse the following week and the week after that, and that something was mending between them that had been broken for almost 2 decades. The photograph of Celine still lived in Whisper's vest, over his heart. But he'd shown it to Nathan now. He'd told the stories he'd kept locked away, the fishing trips, the way she laughed, the last time he'd seen her before the storm. The telling hadn't brought her back, nothing could, but it had made her real again, present, instead of just a wound he carried in silence. On the first Saturday of August, the Iron Levy MC held their annual summer cookout at the clubhouse in Montagut. Nadine and Marcus came. So did Lucille and Gerald and Cécile Thibodaux, and a dozen other people who'd been pulled into the orbit of this story without quite knowing how. The bayou glittered in the late afternoon light. Peanut was teaching Marcus how to skip stones across the water. Whisper sat in a lawn chair with Nathan beside him, both of them holding beers, not talking much, just sitting in the kind of comfortable silence that takes years to earn. Nadine watched her son laugh at something Peanut said, a real laugh, loud and unself-conscious, and felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for longer than she could remember. "You doing okay?" She turned. Whisper had walked over, leaving Nathan with Beau, who was telling some story that involved expansive hand gestures. "Yeah." She meant it. "I think I am." "Good." He looked out at the water, at Marcus, at the life happening around them. "You know, I spent 20 years trying to save everyone else's kids because I couldn't save my own. Thought that was the point. The purpose. Wasn't it?" "Partly. But I think—" He paused, choosing his words. "I think the real point was learning how to stop running, to sit still long enough to let people in, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." Nadine thought about walls and doors, about years of saying no because yes felt like weakness, about a boy who wrote everything down because the world wouldn't let him speak, and how he'd stood in front of a room full of strangers and spoken anyway. "Yeah," she said. "I think I'm learning that too." Whisper nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Across the yard, Marcus looked up from the bayou's edge. He caught Nadine's eye and waved, water dripping from his fingers, the late sun turning everything gold. She waved back. The heat had broken, the silence had broken, and something new was growing in the spaces they'd left behind. Sometimes the bravest thing we do is let people in. If this story moved you, subscribe so you never miss one. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us who showed up for you when you needed it most.